So today we're going to be talking about the 2019 Cabrinha FX. Now in just the last few years, the FX has really dominated the freestyle crossover category, and while it's become one of our favorite freestyle kites, it may or may not be the right kite for you. So the FX wing does remain the same this year, but the FX has been rebridled, resulting in changes that will improve the freestyle capabilities of this kite. So the last few years, the Cabrinha FX has caught a lot of riders' attention. You know, aggressive jumps, aggressive kite loops, aggressive turning. Are you noticing a trend here? So while a rider could learn on the FX, it might be a better fit for a more intermediate to advanced rider, or just a rider who's looking for something a bit more potent. So we've been doing something different the last couple of months now on our channel, and for every video there is a written blog that will be paired with it. So if you click that eye icon in the upper right hand corner of your screen, you can open up our blog in a new tab, and when you finish this video, you can read about the FX, and you can also watch the comparison video that we did comparing the 2019 Cabrinha FX to the new 3-strut Cabrinha Moto. And with both of these kites being 3-strut kites in the lineup, there might be some of you out there who are torn between which kite is the right kite for you, so give that a watch and then you can decide for yourself. So let's start with the wind range. Now the FX is a crossover freestyle kite, so naturally it is going to have a reduced wind range in contrast to an all-around kite like the Switchblade. Granted, compared to a few years ago, all freestyle kites have come a long way in this regard. So what does this mean for you? Well, if you're an experienced rider, not that much. So with 3 struts and a faster turning speed, the FX does like to be flown aggressively. And what this means is when you encounter a hole in the wind or the wind gets a bit lighter, unlike a free ride kite, you're going to have to work this kite. You're going to have to move it and sign it to actually generate power. And what this comes down to is what kind of rider you are. So some riders prefer to set their kite and forget it and let the kite do all the work. Other riders are looking for something a little more involved. And what you get with the FX is a bit more control. So if you are an experienced rider, the reduced wind range isn't going to impact you that much. You will notice that you have to work the kite. You will notice that the power is not quite there anymore. But you can certainly make up for it, and it's actually pretty fun when you know what you're doing. Now for newer riders, this is an area of the kite that will impact you, as it does have a reduced wind range and it does take more skill to ride upwind with the FX. You know, until you develop those kite skills, this is going to be noticeable for you. So it really is an appealing kite for that rider that does want to be more involved, and I've made the analogy before that you can almost think of the FX as a stick shift. So for that rider that wants a kite that's going to respond to what they're doing with their body, how they're edging their board speed, the FX is just going to feel a lot more in tune and connected to what you're doing on the water. So let's talk about jumping. Now, I put a lot of time in on the FX over the last year and a lot of thought on the best way to articulate it. Back to that stick shift analogy, the FX is more in tune to what the rider is doing. So, board speed is very important. When you release is very important. But the good news is for that intermediate or advanced rider who's looking for more control over how they're jumping, the FX is going to be much more responsive to what you're doing and the input that you're giving the kite. So this can be a point of confusion, as a lot of people will see a lot of different reviews, and it's a bit frustrating because you'll hear one kite jumps amazing and this kite jumps amazing. Okay, they both jump amazing. Which one jumps better? The FX requires more timing, the Switchblade feels more automatic. And while the FX does give the rider more control over how you jump, the Switchblade is easier to jump. So at the end of the day between these two, it just comes down to who's jumping with a kite. And the level of this can be quantified as so high, it just doesn't really affect us mere mortals. If you're a rider that wants more control over your kite and more control over how your kite's going to jump, then the FX is a great contender. So the bottom line here is the FX doesn't have a smooth, automatic pull-and-go jumping feel like a freeride kite would have, say the Switchblade or the Moto. But it does have a very aggressive jump, or a very powerful jump, or a very smooth jump, depending on what kind of input you give your kite. So it is a great jumper in that regard. So let's talk about the bar pressure and feel. Now the FX, depending on the setting you use, can have lighter bar pressure or more moderate bar pressure if you go to the heavier setting. And this just depends on what kind of ride that you want to get. So if you want to really feel where that kite is in the sky and you want a slightly slower kite, then you're going to want to use their hard setting. And if you want a faster kite, then you can set the bridle on the point closest to the wingtip. It's going to speed the kite up, the kite loops are going to be faster, it's going to have lighter bar pressure, and it's just going to be a light, fun feeling kite in that regard. So the first thing you might notice about a kite like the FX, if you've never flown a crossover kite like this before, is it is much more responsive to the input you're giving the kite. So if you're in choppier water, or if you're more aggressive with the kite's going to respond in kind, as opposed to that delayed feel that you would get from an all-around kite. And this isn't necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, it's more a matter of what you're used to riding. If you're used to riding an automatic feeling type kite like the Switchblade, when you move over to the FX, you're going to have to adapt to riding with a kite that actually responds to every little thing that you tell it to do. So I mentioned earlier that the kite will respond more to how you're edging, and this actually applies when you're in choppy water or when you're in gustier wind or whatever it may be. The more aggressive you are with the kite, the more aggressive the kite is. The softer and smoother input you give the kite, the softer and smoother this kite's going to be. So let's talk stability. Now in regards to stability, for a 3-stroke kite, the FX really is quite impressive, and this is actually a trend that we've noticed with all of Cabrinha's kites, is they all have somewhat of a shock absorbent feel, a very damp feel in the bar, and you will notice this with the FX. Now the FX, it is faster and it can be more aggressive, but when it comes to handling gusty wind, the FX actually handles it quite well. And while Cabrinha does have a very distinct feel on the water, most modern 3-stroke kites have become incredibly stable in the last couple of years, as opposed to, say, pre-2014. And while you can't expect a 3-stroke kite to be as stable as a 5-stroke kite, the FX does a fantastic job when you're riding in really bad conditions. And we've tested this kite in every condition imaginable at this point. And I've had days where the wind was incredibly turbulent and the FX holds up quite well. And when you're hooked in, it does a great job of busting up the gust and making for a comfortable ride even when you're in subpar conditions. So the bottom line here, like all 3-stroke kites, the FX is not going to be as stable as a 5-stroke kite, but that's simply the trade-off that you're going to make when moving to a faster, lighter kite, or any of the characteristics that you would like to get from a 3-stroke kite. All that said, as far as 3-stroke kites go, the FX does have that shock-absorbing, very damp, very controlled Cabrinha feel that you can expect from just about every kite in Cabrinha's lineup. So let's talk about kite loops. Now obviously the FX was designed with kite loops in mind. It actually has a setting on the bridle made for kite loops. When it first came out, it really took a lot of light away from the Switchblade just because everybody was so excited about this new kite that was just incredible for kite looping. And to that end, the FX delivers. If kite loops are important to you, this is probably the kite that you want to be on. It's the fastest kite in their lineup, gives the rider the most control, it likely has the most aggressive kite loops in the lineup. Frankly, it's just an all-out performance kite. So if all-out performance is what you're looking for, then you're going to want to be on the FX. So let's talk about surfing and foilboarding. Now when it comes to this category, the FX has a lot of competition in Cabrinha's lineup. And I mean, to be frank, the Drifter is going to be a much better choice, the Moto is going to be a better choice, the Switchblade is going to be a better choice. So if waves are on your radar, the FX does have some all-around characteristics that will make it work well in the waves, but it's certainly not going to match up to a lot of the other kites in their lineup. Now as far as foilboarding goes, again, there are a lot of great options and it depends on what the rider is looking for. The Moto was built with foilboarding in mind. The Drifter is incredible for foilboarding. And the FX, it's going to get the job done. To give you some perspective here, our team rider Blake Olson learned to foilboard and has been foilboarding on the FX exclusively for 2 years, and it hasn't slowed down his progression at all. So in that regard, the FX is going to work, but it does lack the drifting characteristics that you would expect from the Drifter. So the bottom line here is the FX is going to get the job done, but it doesn't have the same driftability as the Drifter. It wasn't quite built for foilboarding like the Moto had that in mind, but it certainly gets the job done. So let's talk about unhooked freestyle and wake style. Now with this category, the FX is definitely the best choice in Cabrinha's lineup. It was designed to have that pop and slack ability. There is a freestyle setting on the bridle, so you can really fine tune this kite to just really perform and give you that ultimate pop and slack if handle pass tricks are on your radar. And of course, everything else in the lineup does work. You can certainly unhook on a Switchblade, but the FX pound for pound is going to be the most performance kite in this particular category, hence it's a crossover freestyle kite. So the FX has been rebridled, resulting in some geometry changes to the kite. And the idea here is to improve the freestyle capabilities. In 2018, they made some modifications to the bridle that made a huge difference when testing the kite back to back from year to year. And with the new Moto filling in some of the gaps, the FX is just taking another step forward in the freestyle category. So yeah, this is the kite that you want to be on if handle passes or unhooking or wake style are on your radar. So the bottom line here is you get everything you'd like out of a sea kite and nothing that you wouldn't want. So hey guys, I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please give the video a thumbs up and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And until next time, this has been Rygo, and we'll see you next week.